Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Reus. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Isco an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by our most popular guest returning to the show. It is Rob Turner. You may recognize his voice from the Bundesliga broadcast that I'm sure all of us enjoy every weekend. But thank you for coming back on the show. How are you?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Yeah, great to see you. And yeah, I'm all good. Football season's finished. Bundesliga, well, football season never finishes, but the Bundesliga is over for now. Yeah, it was a long, intensive season with lots to do. Unfortunately, I only did a couple of Dortmund games last season. I was doing a lot of Leverkusen and Freiburg, it felt like, towards the end of the season. So good to be talking about Dortmund again.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we have a lot of news. We have Dortmund's first signing of the summer and Jobe Bellingham to discuss. We're going to be talking about Jamie Gittens. Where does Dortmund go from here in the midfield, as well as some Club World Cup stuff, because the soccer season really does not end anymore. It's not just transfer season. There are games. We had the Nations League the past couple of weeks, and now somehow the football season is approaching its what feels like 12 months. Consecutively, but let's start off with the Jobe Bellingham signing. Coming in, the final fee ended up being between 30.5 and 33 million euros, depending on whose reporting you believe, with potentially another 5 million in add-ons and 10 to 15% as a sell-on clause. Again, like the reporting on this one, and in recent years this has happened, but there's just a bit of separation. I don't really think that it's that far apart to change my opinion on it, but what are your thoughts on this move?
Well, it was one of those that was always seemed logical, didn't it? It was, he's been talked about for a long time, and it was, it's low risk, but it's high risk as well, because it's low risk in that the settling in time won't take long at all. He knows the city, he knows the club, his parents know the club. He spent a lot of time there when Jude was in Dortmund. His mum lived with him. With Jude, when he was there, she's moving to Dortmund with him again. So, there's going to be no sense of him trying to find his feet in a strange new country, because he knows it all. The flip side is the huge risk. There's a double weight of expectation on his shoulders. First is the fee that you've mentioned, because that's not as insignificant as you may think, because depending on who you believe, then it could make him Dortmund's most expensive transfer of all time, which at 19 years of age is a lot of burden on your shoulders. Secondly, also, depending on whether it's 1 or 2 million more, it would make him more expensive than Jude was. So again, you've got that expectation of him having to perform straight away. And also, even though they've been at pains to avoid comparisons with Jude, you cannot get away from them. I mean, his welcome video today in Dortmund was, all about not following in footsteps, but, I'm going to carve my own path. But the comparisons are inevitable. They won't go away, not only because of the name, but also because of the similarities in the playing style as well. So I think that it's a really interesting one. I'm very confident that it'll work out. I think that he has that same maturity and confidence that his brother had, and his brother settled in straight away. His debut against Gladbach when he was 17, he got an assist within the first 10 minutes. It took everything in his stride, and I'm sure that Jobe will be exactly the same, because he's even further down his development than Jude was when he joined Dortmund. Jobe's already got 100 appearances, around about 100 appearances for Sunderland, was a key figure in a team that won promotion to the Premier League this season. He could have had his pick of clubs. There was several other Bundesliga clubs after him, Premier League clubs after him. So the potential is there. The experience is already there. The maturity is there. So I think that it'll take a lot for this to go wrong.
Yeah, and also, the floor for this as a signing financially, I think for Dortmund is not that bad, because he's coming in with like a 8,000 minute sample size in the championship as an English homegrown. So at his age, like even if he does not necessarily like light it up for Dortmund, you're still talking about at least making your money back in 2 to 3 years, and a guy who will be very easy to shift, potentially even at a profit, depending on TV rights deals and a lot of other economic situations happening around football. So I think I've talked about this on some of our other shows, so I don't want to say too much and repeat myself. But I think it's just a great transfer, and I constantly compare this to like the RG Gray move financially last year, because similarly they were the best teenagers in the championship. Jobe is definitely more senior ready, like that shows up in his statistics. Like he's not just on the pitch and like throwing himself about in duels like RG Gray was last year and showing flashes here and there. Like this is a guy that is contributing to winning football. Obviously, played a lot of minutes this past season. I made a joke on our last episode that he has more 90s in the championship than he could get in the Bundesliga, because he had 38 full 90s played in the championship, or worth of minutes, and there's only 34 games in the Bundesliga. So I think his stats, despite moving to a more difficult league, should get better, and I just feel very confident in saying that. So let's get into our next bit of business. This is like breaking news as we record this. Jamie Gittens will be staying at the club. Bids of 35 and 55 or 50 million euros were rejected by Borussia Dortmund. What do you kind of think about this and the Gittens situation?
It's a difficult one, isn't it, with Jamie Gittens, because everyone was really excited about him, from throughout the club. This is a player of huge potential, could emulate, even surpass what the likes of Jadon Sancho achieved when he was at Dortmund at that age. He showed those flashes of brilliance. Then there was that period when he was Dortmund's match winner at the start of last season. It looked as if the world was at his feet. He was Dortmund's star man. Just think the home game against Bayern. And he was Dortmund's standout player. So you don't get that level of attention, accolades, and reputation within the club unless there's a real player in there. He lost his way somewhat when Niko Kovac came in. He was the player that was scapegoated a little bit. You've seen that with Niko Kovac. Wherever he's been, there's always been a high-profile player that he makes an example of to almost stamp out his own authority. Like at Bayern, it was Thomas Müller. At Wolfsburg, it was Max Kruse. And so, you're wondering who's it going to be at Dortmund. And as it turned out, it was Jamie Gittens. And he sort of, was struggling to really make his mark under Niko Kovac. He still made, lots of appearances, was always coming in on off the bench. I think there's probably only, of all the outfield players that Dortmund had last year, I think he still had the most minutes. Because he kept coming on all the time. He's really high up there. But still, you could tell he doesn't fit into Kovac's system. He's not his kind of player. And now with the success at the end of the season, getting into the Champions League, it looks like Kovac is going to get a long-term deal. And they can't really afford to keep a player like Gittens unhappy for a whole season if he's under Kovac. So it's not the trajectory that we were probably expecting from Gittens. I was expecting more of a, like a Jadon Sancho type trajectory, two or three seasons, playing really well, and then get a mega bucks offer that they can't refuse, and everyone's sort of happy at the end of it. I think that they would, that was probably the course that was set for him. So his departure has probably been brought forward a little bit, and the figures that they're trying to get for him are reflected in that as well. Like Chelsea can think that they can afford to come in with a low ball offer straight away, shows that there's probably discontent on the players' side, and it's probably going to be wiser to cut the losses rather than have an unhappy Jamie Gittens there next season.
Yeah, I definitely think he gets sold this summer. It's most appearances, not most minutes. So he matched Gregor Kobal's 32 appearances in the league. I don't have the time to do the Champions League math and add his minutes up, but because so many of his appearances were off the bench, he did have a few less minutes than some other outfield players, but he still more than doubled his minutes from the previous season. And he, to me, was one of the only attackers that I noticed have a decrease in expected attacking output under Niko Kovac. Like, Kareem Adeyemi went from like a guy a little over point 0.5 having still a breakout campaign to 0.73, which is like more in line with some of the years Sane has had, and a lot of guys that put up those numbers are at clubs like Bayern that are running away with every single game. And you had Julian Brandt go from being at about 0.4 expected goals and expected assists per 90 to at about 0.5 at the end of the year, whereas Gittens went to hovering around 0.4 down to 0.3, something like that, to finish the season, 0.3 something, which just shows that at the end of the year, he definitely had his head turned. He definitely devalued himself, despite scoring like that one-headed goal, probably the only headed goal he scored at Dortmund to end the season. But yeah, he did struggle down the stretch. He definitely devalued himself, but Dortmund in recent years have built up a lot of trust from me in terms of their sales of players, where you don't necessarily think they have a ton of negotiating room. Like, you look at Fulkrug last summer, he was very kind to Dortmund and didn't necessarily voice or show his displeasure in any public way, which you cannot say for Gittens. But Dortmund still, after signing Serhou Guirassy for, like, we can talk about the low fee, but it's a sizable outlay if you include his wages and the signing bonus. And so everyone knew Fulkrug was going, and they still got a lot of money for a guy who had a very bad year, especially when you take out some of the penalties, because I know with that it inflated it up to 20 goals and assists, but it really wasn't that great a year. And his stock seemingly was never lower. They doubled their money on that in one summer. And then Mullen, again, similarly to Gittens, just didn't really look like he wanted to be here. He's never been a guy that does a lot of pressing, but just even when we had the ball this year, it didn't look the same. You didn't see the same productivity from him in the first half of the season that you'd seen in the last 2 years. And in the winter, they got a decent fee for him. Like, you may have wanted that to be a little bit higher, but I do trust Sebastian Kehl to sell more than some other things that you may ask of him. So right now I'm trusting him. He rejected the bids, and I think that, like, maybe Nico Williams says, I'm going to stay at Bilbao, and that creates like a ripple effect in the market where now a couple clubs that are interested in him then have to all compete for Barcola. Barcola goes, and there's this cascading effect where now, instead of Chelsea trying to get in early on Gittens, Chelsea has to compete with some of their rivals for him. And all of a sudden, that fee at 65 million euros is fairly reasonable compared to like Rodrigo is a guy who's potentially leaving Real Madrid for 100 million euros. Barcola is going to be a similar fee. And so you may not want to spend that on a left winger. So I think I'm going to trust Sebastian Kehl from now. Do you think I'm a little bit misplaced, a little too optimistic as a Dortmund fan?
No, I think there's something in that, especially when you think about that, the chain reaction throughout Europe that you just mentioned there. I noticed the sort of wink in your eye when you were saying about trusting him to sell more than potentially any other things. But yeah, I mean, it is one of Dortmund's strengths, isn't it? Over the last 10 years plus, is this even longer this ability to buy cheap and sell expensive. That they make the stars. It's going to be interesting what they do though this summer, because Sebastian Kehl has actually said they are going for a different approach now. It's not just that highly talented youngsters who will play great football, and then we can sell them in 2 years' time for a massive fee. That they have addressed this question of mentality and character, and so when you do have then a Gittens who is unhappy and doesn't fit into this new mold of we want strong leaders who are going to grab the game by both hands and give everything for the cause in that kind of typical Ruhr district football that the fans like to see. As long as you fight with passion, then you can get away with pretty much anything. But they sort of skirted round this issue of mentality because it was very much a media topic for a long time, that Dortmund didn't have the mentality monsters, as we now say in English, thanks to Jurgen Klopp, or these players full of character, and that was what was costing them the trophies in the end. They didn't want to admit it, but now this is sort of the first public admission that it has been lacking, and they do need a different kind of player. So I totally agree that Gittens will be gone. I'm also cautiously optimistic at the things that Sebastian Kehl's been saying, that there is going to be a different approach and potentially a different result at the end of this double transfer window.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see what that approach will be, because it feels like in recent years that's almost some of the signings you can look at and be like, that's not worked out. Where you look at Salihamidzic, and this is such a cheap gamble compared to so many of the other Dortmund moves, but it's clearly not worked out. That's a guy that was supposed to be here for all his peak years, and he just hasn't been good enough during those years. You look at Sabitzer, we were supposed to be buying the end of his peak years, and we got surplus value last summer, and that looked like a really good start to the transfer, and it was mainly an expected goals, expected assist over performance, five assists from 1 point something expected in the Champions League last season. But it really worked out. We got to a Champions League final, but this year, even before the injury, we didn't get the value, and now you're in the back half of the contract and you're looking at it ooh. And then this year you signed Pascal Gross at an age that's a little bit over mine, and you signed Serhou Guirassy. These are win now signings. You pair that with Koto at 22 and Maxi Bayer at 21. These guys are going to peak at the time that Guirassy and Gross are going to be falling off a little bit, not at their best. Maybe the years of their contracts where they're not living up to their value after you've already extracted that extra value up front. And that to me is one of the things you talked about, my wink. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because you bought these win now guys, and you bought some guys that are system players that are supposed to develop and mature into winning players for Dortmund, but you're not necessarily seeing the winning on the pitch this season, at least. We still have the Club World Cup, obviously. I'm going to save my thoughts on if that trophy counts, how much it counts, for our last segment of the show. But there's a lot of elements there that you can talk about the mentality and changing the way you do things, but what is it? Because to me, it should be targeting guys like Maxi Bayer, not your 18 to 21 year olds, and getting guys that'll be here like Nico Schlotterbeck that you sign 1 or 2 years before their peak, and you get them through a couple years of their peak, hopefully on a contract extension. And you have seen some cases of doing that, mid-season Daniel Svensson coming in at 23. But I'm trying to picture the long-term vision for parts of our squad, and I'm not seeing it, but I also don't have all the cards that Sebastian Kehl has. And I'm going to use that to segue us into our next segment. I kind of wrote keep, loan, sell, but this is more who do you think can be sold, not who would you like to sell from our midfield. What direction do you go? Because now we have a lot more names, bodies, whatever you want to say, than we have spots. Because right now we're probably looking for a 10 with Julian Brandt there, Gio Reyna basically on his way out, Karni Chukwuemeka's loan ending. So that frees up some space, but you just brought in a guy that's played 3,500 minutes. And just to list off the amount of guys we still have in midfield that I haven't named yet, we have Sabitzer on the books, Pascal Gross on the books, Felix Necha, Emre Can played 17 appearances in defensive midfield last season, Salioschin, and Kielwatyan, who's still contracted at the club, though only got like 40 minutes last season.
I think Kielwatyan we can just leave to one side for the minute. I think if he's not made the breakthrough just yet, so he either needs a bit more time or he's not gonna make it. The problem that Dortmund have got is they want to overhaul the squad, but they've got so many high earners on the payroll who will, probably won't want to move for a big decrease in salary. And within the Bundesliga, Dortmund are some of the highest payers. There aren't many clubs that pay better than Dortmund in the Bundesliga. So unless they can manage to manoeuvre a move to the Premier League or something, they're going to have to settle for less wages. And are they going to want to do that? A Sabitzer or going into defence, Zula, and then especially Mukoko and Aller that are obviously not on the midfield list, but are part of that group of players that they sort of need to get off the payroll because that they're not going to play a crucial role next season, but are taking up a lot of financial space. So whether Dortmund want to sell them or not, it's going to be actually difficult to do so. I think of the players that we've mentioned, I think Pascal Gross is definitely going to be one that has to stay. He sort of really came into his own, especially towards the end of the season, has that calmness, that authority, that experience that they really do need. I think that Felix Necha is now on the cusp of, really establishing himself at Dortmund. He was great under Niko Kovac, forced his way back into the Germany squad. I think that he's now going to be given the opportunity, it's probably his last chance, to say, right, we're entrusting a leadership role to you now, and if he doesn't take that chance, then he'll be gone. But I think that he will get that chance next season. Özcan is an obvious one that they need to get rid of because he doesn't fit into anyone's plans at Dortmund at the moment. Didn't work out for him at Wolfsburg either when he went on loan there, so it's a case of where does he go. Obviously it's an obvious one would be back to Köln now that they've been promoted back. That's where he's from. It would fit their kind of profile. Then the Gio Reyna one's also interesting because, again, obviously everyone expects him to be going, yet he's the face of the Club World Cup campaign. When they launched the new special shirt for the Club World Cup, it was Gio Reyna.
I don't know if you've heard, Rob, but there's another American joining Borussia Dortmund for the Club World Cup, and I'm not sure he's even turned 16 yet. So if they celebrate, you got to keep the beers away from him because we're a little bit more strict about that here. But Mathis Albert is stepping in line to be, I guess, the next American face of Dortmund for whatever that's worth. He's a very highly rated prospect, but Gio Reyna's probably out the door.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not too well versed in who the new young American is, but hopefully he has the same kind of initial impact that Gio Reyna had at Dortmund. When Gio Reyna was that age, around 17, he was a superstar for Dortmund, and he was one of the best players and in the Lucien Favre team. So hopefully he can have that kind of impact, but we'll see. But yeah, it was obviously well aware as to why Gio Reyna was the face of the Club World Cup shirt launch heading to the US. But yeah, it's one of those, isn't it, that you think, hang on a second, I thought you were going, but no. Yeah,
they definitely kept him around for the last. He was not a player that they were willing to let go before the Club World Cup, unlike Jamie Gittens, for better or worse. And Gio Reyna, I think, though, will be one of the easier guys to sell because of that commercial aspect. we've had a couple guests on the show, and they're like, "Oh, Giorin as a footballing player, like he's not necessarily worth the money that Dortmund want when we're talking about like a 10 million euro fee." But when you take into account the fact he is American, and if you ever go on tour in America, which I would argue too many clubs like to do at the cost of some of their players' careers and injuries and stuff like that, but it is a fact of the modern world, the modern football game, that a lot of these clubs want that commercial impact, even if it's not on tour, to sign Giorena. So I think he's a guy we can take off. Mukoko and Haller both in the last year of their contract. I think it's just about how much of their wages you're getting back this year. Like you're gonna have to pay them off at some point. Likely transitioning to a back three. I almost think it's just worth it to keep Sula because he's only like 10 million wages is only 10 million in wages. And for what Sula provides, you're not going to find a guy for like less upfront than what he makes. So to me, the issue is really Marcel Sabitzer, who's been in decline for a couple years now, and Emre Can, because like you said with Mecha, like this is his last chance to claim a leadership role. But like if someone came in with a big bid, you might want to say yes, but then at the same time, he's the only one here that's really, even if you include Jobe Bellingham, played as a six before. And maybe you get rid of the six because you have that third center back, but that's like a whole can of worms that I'm not sure Dortmund wants to open with. And then you could be looking at a world where mid-season, if Niko Kovac, who's historically lasted 18 months, doesn't make it the whole time, you don't necessarily have all your eggs are into one basket, and now you need to sign a coach who wants to play with the back three. So that's a very difficult sale because I don't know if we have a six that we've been monitoring for the last 6 months. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and I think that at the end of the day, Dortmund really need Emre Can to be willing to leave the club, because with Marcel Sabitzer joining Dortmund from Bayern Munich, he took a 30 million, something like that, euro deal, and just spread out the money over an extra year to join Dortmund. And so he's already taken a pay cut. Like his fourth year is essentially to him free. Like he is working for free because he was already guaranteed the same amount of money on one less on a shorter contract with Bayern Munich. And so now I just don't know, like, if someone, like, it would have to be from Italy, I think, for either of these teams, because I just don't think the Premier League interest is going to be there for either. And for Spain, like, you don't have the top end of clubs, like maybe an Atleti, but then we're talking about like one club. So now we have Atleti or someone from Italy that can pay these guys. But even then, like, we're talking about probably a pay cut. So maybe someone from Italy comes in and offers Sabitzer like a smaller pay cut, but a really long, like 4-year contract, and then he's willing to go. I don't necessarily want to count on that. So I think it's really just about, for me, if Emre Can is willing to leave. But do you think I'm like off base there? Like, do you think that either of those players will have a suitor, whether it's in Germany or abroad?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, the Premier League could be a bit difficult. They've both been there, and neither of them pulled up any trees. Can at Liverpool and Sabitzer at Man United. So there'll probably be a case of used goods about them in the Premier League. So yeah, I think it would be difficult for them to find anywhere. Within Germany, the chances of Can finding a club are probably a little bit higher. Things like, like clubs of the caliber of Eintracht Frankfurt. Again, Can is from Frankfurt, but they're playing Champions League next year. Would they want someone as experienced as Emre Can, who's been there, done it in the Champions League for them? I mean, this obviously is absolute pure speculation, but it would be, that's something that I could envisage fitting for him. Zabitzer's probably a lot more difficult just because of the wages. He's not going to go. he's not going to go, down a wage tier to move from Bayern to Dortmund, to go down yet another wage tier to join a Leverkusen or Leipzig or wherever it is. Obviously, Leipzig would, he's been there before, so it wouldn't, maybe would they have him back? Don't know. But yeah, I think it is a difficult one. The one trump in Dortmund's pack, as far as Sabitzer goes, is that he's had a fairly decent time with Austria recently, and Austria are one of the most talked about teams in Europe at the moment under Ralf Rangnick. They were they were thrilling at the Euros last year, unluckily went out, and gaining a reputation as an excellent footballing side, and he's a cornerstone of that side. And so that's something that is in Dortmund's advantage when it comes to finding international suitors for him. So I think they could be confident that Sabitzer would find a club abroad, but I don't think he'd be willing to go to another German club.
Yeah, he could fill part of a Tiani Rangers-sized hole. Like, that's not a completely dissimilar player. Rangers runs into empty space a bit more, but I don't think either is statistically an exceptional passer. They both run around a bit in midfield. They both shoot from distance a lot, but I feel like he'd definitely be looking at a backup position there, and I don't necessarily know if AC Milan really thinks that way. I think they're one of the teams that's owned by an American investment firm, and the American investment firm-owned teams have been looking at that younger player model, buy low, sell high type of deal. But that is a team that's going to be in a lot of turmoil. A lot of their senior players at left back, Lucas Hernandez, maybe I said the wrong brother's name, I don't know, or Leao, both potentially leaving. They may want a bit of experience, and that could be a fit. But I find it hard to imagine him anywhere. But I do I think there's a market that will emerge for Sabitzer. I just don't know if, like you said, if he's willing to take the pay cut that may come.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I think there's going to still be a lot of upheaval over the summer, and it's such a weird one with the Club World Cup, because you've basically got 2 pre-seasons. You've got to take this squad that they've got now to the Club World Cup, where it's more than a friendly tour. It's there is something at stake. It's a lot more high profile than than your usual summer tour. And when you get back from that, you're then looking at the next transfer window, and to bring in lots of new players to replace the ones that you've just spent all summer with. And you've got a really, really short space of time for pre-season, because the Bundesliga starts again mid-August. They won't be starting proper pre-season after the Club World Cup until well into July. So time is really, really limited to then get the squad gelled. You would hope that they've already identified the players that they want, but actually identifying them, bringing them in, and then getting them to gel as part of a new look team. Totally different kettles of fish.
Absolutely. And the last thing before we go into discussing the Club World Cup in a little bit more depth is, I don't need a player's name, though I wouldn't not be against it if you have one. But what positions do you think Dortmund need to target?
They could do with... Well, if Gittens goes, then I think a classic number 10 or a wide attacker they would need there. I would also really want another really solid centre back, especially if we're going to be playing with the back 3, because you've only really got Schlotterbeck, who's the leader of the line. The others around him are alongside Schlotterbeck, and he's injured at the moment. So if he's, when he's out, they've got a bit of a problem. So you would want another, certainly another centre back. All depending on how the midfield looks, on how many people that they do move on. I would be. I think the midfield is looking fairly okay with a sort of a Bellingham Mecha axis in the middle. I think that was one that we could look forward to. So I think creative player in behind Guirassy and a pacey, skillful, attacking wide player is. But names. Do I have names? I mean, there's the.
I said you didn't need to give me a name. So. There's no stress. I think the obvious one would be like Mio, just because of the release clause. I feel like this could honestly be the best player of the three we potentially buy out of Stuttgart. But I feel like they're almost against it just because we just did it twice.
Yeah, I think it really was the case, wasn't it, against Stuttgart last season, that when the 5-1 defeat, Mio was just unplayable that day. And that was almost like a job application. He took Dortmund apart. And so, Mio would be great. Really good value as well. That buyout clause is ridiculously low. So it's just a case of, could yet another player from Stuttgart? Are they really going to do it? But yeah, he's a great player. And of course, the other one is Cherki from Lyon. They've been in for him quite a few times. Was supposed to be coming last year. Could have been coming in the winter. Has just made his France debut as well. Here in Germany at the weekend in the Nations League. So, without me knowing too much about him, he seems to be the one that they've really got their eyes on. And
he's basically confirmed from Fabrizio Romano, not a club announcement yet, but it looks like he's been poached by like I said on our last show, these are two unrelated statements. John Texter's biggest investment is in DAZN, which is a media company in North America, and their biggest investor, Saudi Arabia. And all of a sudden, he rejects the move, even though he has a gentleman's agreement. And this is a separate statement, completely independent from the one before it. Now, Cherki has agreed terms with a team that is owned by someone who is affiliated with the Saudi Arabian royal family. So make of that what you will.
Okay.
But that appears to be off the table for Dortmund.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, they're not going to be able to compete with that kind of financial clout.
Yeah. Similar fee to what was initially rumored, but they did get an extra 4 to 8 million with bonuses based off what's reported. So good for them. Lyon desperately need that money to avoid relegation. But now let's talk about another tournament, and this is the Club World Cup. Before we go into any details, can you just give me your general thoughts? Are you going to be watching this? Are you excited to stay up till whatever godforsaken hour the last game starts at? That's on. I don't even stay up for West Coast games, and I'm in the United States.
I must admit, I probably won't be watching them. No, unless I have to do any work around them. But I'm not planning to at the moment. No, I don't think I would be watching them. I'll want to know what the score was when I wake up in the morning. But yeah, here in Germany, some of the games are 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So I won't probably be doing that because I do still have to get up for work the next day. But it's. I'm probably leaning more towards thinking it's a fairly good idea than I was in the past. I mentioned earlier the summer tours that clubs like Dortmund always go on. They were going to have done that anyway, but in effect they're doing that again. They're going to a key target market, the US, where they have got a following. and they're there in competitive fixtures as well. There's a fairly decent financial aspect to it. They get, just 23 million guaranteed, depending on how far they go. Could go to 60, could go to, if they win it, around 100. I mean, so it's not to be sniffed at. These are all figures that would help, especially when we're talking about new transfer targets. And it is a good opportunity to measure yourself against teams that you ordinarily wouldn't. Like the whole host of really good South American teams are going. So there are attractive opponents in there, and I think it is also good to spread this kind of high profile tournament around the globe as well, rather than it being solely focused on in Europe, the Champions League, in South America, the Copa de Libertadores or something. That it is getting that opportunity to have teams who are in their own countries huge, have them on a level playing field with other big teams that are perhaps a little bit more high profile. And I think from Dortmund's case, it's certainly better to have been invited to take part in it than not to have. Because if we were taking it solely on the performance of last season, they wouldn't have made it. But it's definitely one where there would have been severe case of FOMO if Dortmund, if another German team apart from Dortmund had been invited to the tournament.
Yeah, well, we actually kind of did earn it in large part from last season.
Exactly,
because,
reaching the Champions League quarterfinal last season, the final the year before. Yeah.
Thankfully, they did not pick the European teams in a way they may have allegedly picked some of like the North American teams, giving it to like the league spot and not like the playoff winner for MLS to make sure Messi could be there. But they didn't do that, weirdly, for the Saudi Arabian team that Ronaldo played for. So there's a lot of interesting things going on with this tournament. I don't know how I feel. I think it really depends for me on, like, I know some of the stadiums already. I don't know how in depth you know about this, but some of the stadiums are reportedly like going to be in these massive 80,000 seat like American football stadiums, and they're closing the upper bowl, they're closing like the lower bowl or like the middle bowl, and it's just going to be like that lower bowl. And that means to me they're expecting like maybe 20,000 people to attend some of these games. Some even less. That's like for a Dortmund game that they've closed like the mid and the upper bowl when Dortmund play Mamelodi Sundowns in Cincinnati. So I'm confused on like how this tournament is going to look on TV. I think that a lot of people in Europe may, and I should say more like British, people from the UK, people from Spain who may only tune in or watch the highlights for like Real Madrid. I don't know if Barcelona's in it, but for them and for the Premier League games, like you're going to tune in there and you're going to see massive filled stadiums, I'm pretty sure. But you're going to get to see some of the other teams. Like in my home city, we have like a Saudi Arabian team playing a team from like Korea. Maybe some of the Korean population in this area like goes and watches that game. But I find it hard to feel that or believe that they're gonna like fill that stadium, and that's a 20,000 seat stadium. Like that's the DC stadium is a lot smaller, and like the MLS team here doesn't fill it. The women's team does on like a fairly regular basis now in the last year and a half. But do you think that will affect like your opinion on this tournament if you start to see like some of the Dortmund games in Cincinnati and it's just obviously it's probably going to be while you're asleep, think that game might only start at 8 p.m. your time, but like if you turn on that game Saturday night 8 p.m. and you see Dortmund playing in this massive stadium and it's fairly empty, do you think that impacts how you watch this game?
Oh, that's a tough one. Yes and no. Yes, in that I probably wouldn't have expected it to be full because it's not like the Nations World Cup that's going to be in the US next year. It's so like every German that lives in the US would want to go and see Germany for sake of example, but not every German who lives in the US would specifically want to go and see Borussia Dortmund, perhaps because they may be Bayern fans or Schalke fans or what have you, and so they wouldn't bother going to watch Dortmund. And obviously, you're not going to get too many like away fans actually travelling from Germany to support Dortmund in the US. Because of cost and everything, you probably won't get that many. So on the one hand, that doesn't surprise me that much. Also, as well, because it's a new format, these things do tend to take a bit of time to become generally accepted. Maybe in after the third or fourth Club World Cup in this format, if it starts to take on a new profile, people start to get more excited about it. Then you would, you'd see that reflected in the attendances. But I was kind of expecting it. So I didn't. So I don't think it would change my opinion of what the Club World Cup is. Obviously, what part of you would think it's a bit of a shame that this season that has now never ever ended. It just keeps going and going and going. And is it worth it? Is it getting the recognition? Should they have just stayed at home? So I don't think it'll change my opinion too much. It's one of those tournaments where you think it's an inevitability that something like that was going to happen, given the competition between the likes of FIFA and UEFA, that they want their equivalent of the Champions League, they want their piece of the pie, and so of course they're going to have a rival competition. And so these things, it will take time to build up the prestige of a Club World Cup. But who knows if it does in 20 years' time, and it's the tournament that everyone's talking about. You want to have been there at the beginning, and just imagine if Dortmund could actually win the first one. It'd be incredible.
And the last question I'm going to have for you today is there any player from Dortmund that didn't necessarily play a big role this season that you think will play a little bit more during this tournament that you're maybe looking forward to, maybe dreading?
Well, at the moment, on current form, I'd sort of say that Daniel Svensson is the one that everyone will sit up and take notice of at this tournament. For me, he was, I don't want to say unsung hero, because there was a lot of noise about him towards the end of the season. He was like Rookie of the Month in the Bundesliga towards the end, and I think he was, but he was like an understated star, and for me was one of the main reasons why Kovac's system started to work well, because he had a proper wing-back playing in a wing-back position. Because remember, every time that Şahin tried to play a back three, Dortmund got ripped apart, and with him being able to play plays in their proper position, that Svensson really, really blossomed, and all eyes are not particularly on him at the start of the tournament, but they might be at the end of it.
Yeah, it was genuinely shocking to me to see this guy who, like, Dortmund snatched from like a mid-table Italian club in the halfway through the window, and all of a sudden he comes in and looks like he's been playing regular Champions League football for several years. So that was a guy who really shocked me in the second half of the season. But the player I'm interested to watch this tournament is Julian de Renville, because this season it's not like, there have been moments where he's looked incredible and the dribbling is clearly there, but the end product is just not Bundesliga ready. And even when he's gone down to the third tier, there have been a couple times where he's shown things where there's a nice thing you can see in the highlight. I unfortunately have only watched one full game because they don't really air them often here. But to me, his season, like from what people expected after that Mainz performance, was I did not expect. But by this time, he's now, I think, 18, 19. You maybe want to see like something when he plays, especially coming off the bench. And I'm looking forward to seeing him hopefully get a few more minutes against some not necessary, like not Bundesliga level opposition. Like I would like to see him show me like a little bit more this season because the promise is there, the talent is there, and sometimes with young players they just need to see it get put together. And so I think for him this is a really good opportunity to play up against some teams that don't necessarily have the same training facilities, the same class of athlete, the same talent. And I think he should be a guy that's really looking to say, I should be planned for next season in the Bundesliga. Because right now, for me, if like every season we are going to do player profiles and projections going into the season, and if he doesn't show me something this tournament, I'm going to go into my player profile and projection and treat him like a U19 player because that's all he's proven to me he is right now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him in this tournament, maybe get an opportunity that he wouldn't otherwise and see what he can do with it because he has the talent to be a good player. He just needs to show me it on the pitch in a way that's like more than dribbling.
Yeah, that's a good shout. He came to a lot of fanfare when he was, 16, when he came from Anderlecht, and you're thinking this is, at the time, young Belgian footballers were all the rage in Europe, and you're thinking, was very unlucky with injury at the start of his Dortmund career, and as you say, you've seen those little flashes where you think, wow, I didn't know you could do that. But that's a good shout. Yeah, I'll also be intrigued to see how he does.
Yeah, well, that'll do it for us. Is there anything you want to plug other than just the Bundesliga international feed? Wherever you can watch the Bundesliga, you can find Rob's work. Is there anything else?
Well, I suppose that's the main thing, isn't it? Really, for a show like this. But more specifically, of all the places that you might hear my voice on the Bundesliga, definitely go to plug the Goal Arena show on a Saturday afternoon, which I get to host. Luckily, quite a few times. If you haven't picked up on that one yet, it's that the transfer of the successful German format of the Conference, where you go from game to game to game, and catch all the goals as they go in. So if you haven't picked up on that one yet, please do, because it's well worth a watch.
Or to our American viewers who may know a similar program like Red Zone from the NFL, Rob has, like, his eyes have glazed over. He has no idea what that is, I think.
I think I have heard of it, but yeah, certainly not an expert.
Yeah, well, that'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us again, Rob, and to all our viewers, thank you, and please rate us 5 stars, subscribe, follow on whatever audio platform, subscribe to the YouTube, rate us 5 stars, all that good stuff. But thank you for joining, and have a good one.